Why would a wanderer from another star ignore Earth yet seem drawn to Mars? This is the riddle of 3I Atlas, an interstellar object that should have passed through our solar system without fuss. Yet astronomers noticed something strange. Instead of treating Earth as the obvious gravitational heavyweight, Atlas bends closer to Mars, as though the red planet is pulling it in. But here's the twist. Mars has no business being a cosmic magnet. Its gravity is weaker than Earth's. Its sky is thin, fragile, barely a breath compared to our oxygen-rich atmosphere. If Atlas were just a stone adrift, Earth should dominate its path. And yet, it doesn't. So why Mars? To answer, we need to imagine what Mars feels like to a traveler from the void. Earth is wrapped in a magnetic shield, a cocoon of protection. The sun's solar wind smashes against it, deflected and bent, like waves against a fortress wall. But Mars? Mars is exposed. Its shield collapsed billions of years ago, leaving its surface naked under cosmic bombardment. And here's where the science sharpens into poetry. Predators are drawn to the weak, not the strong. A cosmic fragment, carrying volatile ices or ancient molecules, might prefer Mars the way a spark prefers dry grass to wet stone. Vulnerability is invitation. But what if it's not just physics? Mars carries scars of oceans, rivers, and storms long gone. Its rusty skin is iron oxide, a chemistry that remembers water. If Atlas is sensitive, if it chooses, maybe it isn't Mars today that it responds to, but Mars as it was, the drowned planet, the planet that once mirrored Earth. Now the riddle deepens. Did Atlas pause because Mars is scientifically weak, or because something hidden beneath its dust called it closer? And if Mars can call to a wanderer from another system, what else might it summon? And as we drift together into this mystery, let me pause just briefly. Where in the world are you listening tonight? I find it remarkable how many curious minds gather in this quiet corner of the internet. If you're enjoying this sleepy exploration, a gentle like and subscribe helps keep the journey flowing, and it means you'll never miss the next step into the unknown. So what exactly could make Mars act like a silent magnet in the dark? Astronomers have long known that Mars is not the planet we see today. Beneath its barren surface lies a hidden history, one that hints at oceans large enough to drown continents, rivers that carved canyons wider than Earth's, and storms that may once have carried lightning across a blue sky. To Atlas, an object forged far away, Mars may not just be rock and dust, it may be a memory. Consider this. Atlas, like other interstellar travelers, carries with it frozen gases, molecular chains, and cosmic ices, the fingerprints of alien chemistry. When such material nears Earth, it finds no welcome. Earth's thick magnetosphere repels much of the sun's fury, creating a safe bubble that makes volatile ices harder to react or release. But Mars is different. Mars offers no shield. The solar wind cuts directly into its atmosphere, stirring up chemical chaos. It is here that science folds into mystery. A body like Atlas could respond, not consciously but naturally, to such chaos. The sun's winds strip Mars, and Atlas seems to be drawn to that vulnerability, as if sensing an opportunity to scatter its own volatile seeds. A predator and prey, not in biology, but in physics. And yet, this explanation feels incomplete, because the way Atlas curves near Mars isn't fully explained by gravity alone, nor by simple solar chemistry. Some scientists whisper that Mars might possess localized anomalies, strange magnetic patches buried in its crust, remnants of the ancient dynamo that once powered its global magnetic field. To us, they are just faint magnetic scars, but to an interstellar traveler like Atlas, they may act like beacons. Imagine an ancient lighthouse, its flame long extinguished, but its ruins still catching the light of the setting sun. To a passing ship, it might look like a call. Mars could be that ruin, a planet whose magnetic heart died billions of years ago, but whose broken pieces still hum faintly, calling out across space. And Atlas answered. The unsettling part is this: if Atlas is truly answering Mars, even in a passive way, then what does that make Mars? A victim or a host? Did it lure Atlas in, or did Atlas choose it for its weakness? The question remains unanswered, but the implications ripple outward. If Mars can attract one visitor from the stars, it may not be the first. Perhaps long before we watch the skies, others came. Perhaps this barren planet was never truly alone. And if Mars can summon even in silence, what else might it call next? Mars once had a shield. Billions of years ago, its iron heart spun fast enough to generate a global magnetic field, a cloak that wrapped the planet in protection. With that shield, Mars was alive. Rivers roared, oceans glimmered, and storms filled the skies. But then something happened. The course slowed, the cloak unraveled, and Mars was left exposed. To us, that history explains why Mars is a frozen desert today. But to Atlas, a cosmic visitor, Mars is not just a planet. It's a target. Without its shield, Mars is constantly bathed in the raw fury of the sun, ultraviolet radiation, high-energy particles, solar storms. These forces strip its atmosphere molecule by molecule, leaving scars invisible to the human eye, but written deep into the rocks. Now imagine Atlas passing by. It doesn't think, but physics makes choices. Interstellar bodies respond to fields, radiation, chemistry. To Earth, wrapped tight in our protective cocoon, Atlas finds resistance. But Mars is defenseless, bleeding atmosphere into space, like a lighthouse flickering in the cosmic dark. Some scientists suspect this vulnerability isn't just weakness, it's attraction. The solar wind sweeping over Mars creates electric currents, and these currents produce faint electromagnetic whispers. Most objects ignore them. But what if Atlas doesn't? What if it reacts, pulled slightly off course, nudged by signals that Earth hides, but Mars broadcasts freely? That would explain why Atlas lingers, why its trajectory curves differently when Mars is near. It's as if the planet, unknowingly, is still speaking with the universe, long after its shield fell silent. But here's the haunting thought. If Mars can call, is it possible something answers back? And if so, was Atlas simply passing through, or was it summoned? Think of a predator in the night. It doesn't chase every creature it sees, only the weak, the vulnerable, the ones who can't run or hide. Mars, stripped of its shield, may be that vulnerable prey. But what if it's more than prey? What if Mars is bait? Recent studies reveal that certain regions of Mars still hum faintly with magnetism. Crustal patches scattered like embers of a long-dead fire. They sit deep beneath ancient basins, scars left by colossal impacts billions of years ago. To us, these patches are curiosities, reminders of a planet's broken past. But to Atlas, they may be magnets, beacons glowing faintly in the void. Picture it, a comet-like traveler wandering interstellar space for millions of years, drawn subtly toward these signals the way a compass needle finds north. The closer it comes, the stronger the pull, until at last it bends its path. Not toward Earth, not toward Venus, but straight for Mars. Here lies the unsettling twist. If Atlas is guided by these hidden signals, then Mars is not just unlucky, it is chosen, selected out of the solar system like a stone marked with an invisible sign. Why? Perhaps because its atmosphere is thin enough for chemical exchange. Perhaps because its surface is dry enough to preserve what Atlas carries. Or perhaps because long ago something else landed there and Mars has never stopped whispering to the cosmos. If so, Atlas is not the first, and it will not be the last. But then the question burns. If Mars is chosen, what destiny awaits it? And more importantly, why is Earth spared? Mars looks silent. a dead world painted in rust, frozen dunes stretching across an empty horizon. But silence can be deceiving. Dig beneath the dust and you'll find the planet still speaks. For decades, landers and rovers have recorded faint tremors, marsquakes. Unlike earthquakes, these aren't born from shifting tectonic plates. Mars has no moving continents. Instead, its crust cracks and groans like a cooling ember, as if the planet itself sighs in its sleep. But here's the twist. Some of these quakes line up suspiciously with moments when Atlas passed nearby. Coincidence? Maybe, or maybe not. Think about it. A massive interstellar body streaking through the solar system, carrying gravitational influence like an invisible hand. When it brushes past Mars, could it stir the planet's fragile crust, amplifying quakes that would otherwise remain whispers? Even stranger, several quakes occur in places rich with methane traces. Methane on Mars is a scientific obsession because on Earth, most methane comes from life. The fact that it seeps from Martian ground in pulses has haunted scientists for years. Why does it appear suddenly, then vanish? What turns it on and off? Now imagine Atlas flying by, shaking Mars just enough to release pockets of methane trapped below, a cosmic trigger for a planetary secret. If true, Atlas is not just orbiting near Mars, it's interacting with it, stirring its guts, awakening what lies dormant. But here's the part that unsettles. If methane means life, even microbial, then Atlas may be helping Mars breathe, almost like it's feeding the planet or testing it. And so the riddle sharpens. Is Mars trembling because of Atlas's passing, or is Atlas responding to tremors only it can sense? To understand why Atlas behaves differently near Mars, think of the solar system as a stage. Each planet plays its role. Jupiter, the giant shield, swallowing comets. Earth, the oasis, protected and resilient. But Mars is the lure dangling in the dark. Look closer at its surface and you'll see scars carved by cosmic violence. Valles Marineris, a canyon deeper and longer than Earth's Grand Canyon. Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. These aren't just landmarks, they are signals of a planet once overflowing with energy. And here's the paradox. Even in its ruin, Mars may be more noticeable to Atlas than Earth. Think about scent trails in nature. Predators track the weakest, the wounded. Mars leaks gases, loses atmosphere, vibrates with quakes, and shines faint magnetic echoes from its crust. Earth hides beneath its cloak. Mars bleeds. Now flip the perspective. What if Atlas isn't the predator? What if it's the fisherman and Mars the bait? The signals Mars gives off might not just attract Atlas. They could attract others, unseen companions following silently behind, just as we've seen with swarms of fragments trailing comets. Could Atlas be dragging something with it? A hidden swarm, invisible until it strikes? And is Mars the trap meant to catch them, or the victim meant to suffer first? The unsettling part is this. Earth is shielded not just by physics, but by luck. Mars stands exposed. Every scar on its surface is a reminder of how the cosmos chooses its targets. But if Atlas lingers around Mars long enough, will it eventually glance our way? At Mars's poles, white sheets of ice glisten under the faint sun. From afar they look lifeless, frozen caps of water and carbon dioxide. But satellites have detected something stranger, layers that hide darker bands, almost like fingerprints pressed into the planet's history. Beneath one of these icy vaults, radar instruments from the European Space Agency picked up echoes that don't belong to solid ice. They suggest something liquid, perhaps a salty subsurface lake clinging to existence in the freezing cold. Now pause here. A lake beneath Mars, that alone is extraordinary. But ask yourself, why do these radar anomalies appear more active, more pronounced, precisely when Atlas edges closer? The timing has been quietly noted in mission logs. Nothing official, nothing confirmed, but the correlation is eerie. Could Atlas be agitating the ice? Maybe its gravity, faint though it is, nudges enough to stir hidden reservoirs. If so, Mars's frozen heart isn't dead. It beats slowly, irregularly, revealed only when the cosmic visitor leans in. And if there is water, even briny water, then microbes could be there too, dormant, patient, waiting for any trigger. Atlas, knowingly or not, may be their key. So here's the chilling question. If Mars holds life in its frozen vaults and Atlas awakens it, then who or what benefits from that awakening? Here's something peculiar. Earth and Mars share the same sun, nearly the same orbital neighborhood. Yet Atlas brushes past Earth almost indifferently, while Mars captures its gaze. Why? One clue lies in Mars' tilt. Earth spins with a stable axis protected by our oversized moon. Mars, on the other hand, wobbles wildly. Its seasons swing with chaotic intensity, sometimes melting vast stretches of ice, sometimes locking them away. From the perspective of a passing body like Atlas, Mars's shifting tilt may act like a beacon, a planet flashing signals into the void. But some scientists whisper a more unnerving thought. What if Atlas isn't just passing? What if it's watching? Think of a hunter circling a herd. It doesn't attack every animal. It studies. It selects. Mars, with its naked wounds and exposed weaknesses, may be the test subject. Earth is shielded, hidden by clouds, oceans, and magnetic armor. Mars is stripped bare. So Atlas watches, circles, tests. It cracks the crust, shakes the methane loose, nudges the ice, as if probing the planet's limits, almost like an experiment. And here's the hook that lingers. If Mars is the lab, what happens when the experiment ends? Does the hunter move on to the next subject? Does Earth's turn come next? Mars wasn't always barren. Billions of years ago, it roared with rivers, lakes, even sprawling seas. Today, only their dry scars remain, winding channels carved into rock like ancient veins. But here's the unsettling part. Orbiters still detect faint traces of water vapor rising from certain valleys, as if the planet exhales in places it shouldn't. And these exhalations tend to align with Atlas's closest approaches. Coincidence, or is something stirring the embers of Mars' forgotten waters? Imagine a locked chest. For eons, it stayed sealed. Then, a strange key brushes by, not opening it completely, but rattling the lock just enough for something inside to whisper through the cracks. That's what these vapor plumes feel like. Whispers from Mars's drowned past, called out by Atlas's presence. And here's the kicker. If Atlas can awaken rivers that no longer flow, it isn't just interacting with Mars's present. It's pulling on memory itself, geological memory, hydrological memory. But if rivers can remember, if water can stir at the presence of a cosmic wanderer, then what else buried deeper is waiting to respond? Among Mars' strangest features lies Valles Marineris, a canyon so vast it makes the Grand Canyon look like a crack in the sidewalk. Nearly 4,000 kilometers long, it stretches across a fifth of the planet's surface, a wound carved into red stone. Scientists can't agree how it formed. Some say it was tectonic tension, others think it was erosion by ancient floods. But there's a growing suspicion that Mars still listens through this canyon. Instruments have picked up low-frequency hums, seismic echoes that don't match simple quakes. They pulse irregularly, almost like a slow heartbeat. Now here's the twist. Those pulses grow more restless whenever Atlas loops closer, as though the canyon isn't just geology. It's an amplifier, a natural loudspeaker that vibrates when the visitor leans near. If true, then Mars isn't just passively being studied. It's answering back. With every tremor, every subterranean hum, It could be sending signals, not to Earth, but to Atlas. And that raises a haunting possibility. What if Atlas treats Mars differently because Mars, unlike Earth, is actually speaking to it? Every world wears armor. Earth's is invisible, a magnetic field that deflects deadly solar winds, wrapping our planet in a cocoon of protection. Without it, the sun's radiation would strip away our atmosphere, leaving oceans to boil into space. But Mars lost its armor long ago. Billions of years back, the planet's magnetic field sputtered out, its molten core cooled, leaving only a faint magnetic ghost etched in patches across its crust. Those scars still exist today, fossilized in Martian rock, like broken mirrors reflecting a shield that once was. And here's where the story sharpens. Atlas seems to prefer Mars' unshielded state. Unlike Earth, which hides beneath its magnetic bubble, Mars stands naked before the sun, its atmosphere constantly battered by solar storms. To a wanderer like Atlas, that vulnerability might not be a weakness, but an opening. Think of it this way. Earth is a fortress, its defenses invisible but strong. Mars is an abandoned castle, its gates shattered, walls crumbling, every chamber open to the sky. And Atlas? It circles like a thief who knows which locks are broken. Some researchers argue that Atlas's interactions with Mars, its peculiar orbital slows, its proximity to ancient volcanic regions, might be influenced by these magnetic scars. They could act like cosmic signposts, drawing the visitor toward zones of weakness. If Atlas really seeks out these scars, then Mars isn't just a random pit stop. It's a deliberate target, a planet exposed, a planet offering itself. But here's the question that won't let go. If Mars is vulnerable because it has no shield, then what happens when Atlas finally pushes too deep? Imagine walking into a room where someone has been listening the entire time, but never speaking. That's Mars. On Earth, magnetic storms crackle with auroras, oceans roar back with tides. Our planet answers, constantly pushing and pulling against whatever touches it. But Mars stays quiet. Its thin atmosphere doesn't light up like ours. Its dried seas don't move. Its silence is absolute. And yet, silence can be more dangerous than noise. Recent readings from NASA's InSight lander revealed faint vibrations beneath Mars's crust. Not the sharp jolts of quakes we know, but slow, pulsing tremors. Almost like a sleeper shifting in bed, they appear sporadically and unnervingly. Some match periods when Atlas drifts near. If Mars is silent to us but vibrating beneath, then maybe the silence is deceptive. Maybe it's not ignoring Atlas. Maybe it's listening. Picture Mars as a vast instrument, a drum whose skin is stretched tight, whose body resonates with every touch. When Atlas swings close, perhaps it plucks strings we cannot hear, but Mars can. And if Mars listens, then maybe, just maybe, it also learns. Because here's the chilling possibility. Atlas doesn't need Earth. It doesn't need our oceans, our magnetic shield, our chatter of signals. It already has a willing listener, a planet that presents itself like an open ear beneath the sun. So the real question becomes, if Mars listens, what message has it already received? If Earth is restless, volcanoes exploding, tectonic plates grinding, oceans in constant churn, then Mars is the opposite. Silent, frozen, still, or at least that's what we've believed, because scattered across the Martian surface are scars of ancient fire. The Tharsis region, a bulging plateau the size of North America, holds the largest volcanoes in the solar system, and towering above them all, Olympus Mons. It is 3 times taller than Mount Everest, sprawling so wide it could blanket France. But for all its immensity, Olympus Mons appears dead, extinct, frozen in time. Scientists say it hasn't erupted for millions of years. Yet here's the unsettling twist. Not everyone is convinced it sleeps. Recent orbiters have detected odd heat signatures around the Tharsis Rise, localized warming that shouldn't exist on a supposedly dead planet. Some seismic murmurs detected by NASA's InSight suggest activity deep beneath the crust, like embers glowing in a buried fire. Now connect this to Atlas. When the object drifts close to Mars, instruments sometimes register faint changes in thermal readings near Olympus Mons, too faint to call proof, but too consistent to ignore. What if Atlas, this interstellar wanderer, somehow triggers activity buried deep in Mars' mantle, like a match brushed against dry wood? Imagine Olympus Mons, not as a dead mountain, but as a giant waiting for a signal. And here's the haunting thought. If the largest volcano in the solar system awoke, it wouldn't just scar Mars. The ash plumes could rise into space, contaminating or redirecting orbits, even reshaping Mars' fragile atmosphere. But the real terror? Maybe that's the point. Maybe Atlas lingers around Mars not because it's interested in the planet's surface, but in its sleeping heart. And if Olympus Mons stirs again, we'd have to ask the question, was Mars ever truly asleep? Or has it been quietly waiting to be awakened? Every living body has a pulse. With Mars, the search for that pulse has haunted scientists for decades. Its rivers are gone, its seas turned to dust. But some argue a faint heartbeat still thumps below its crust. Here's where the mystery sharpens. Marsquakes. Unlike the violent jolts of Earth, Marsquakes are subtle, long and drawn out, like the creaks of an old ship adrift at sea, and many of them originate suspiciously close to volcanic regions like Tharsis. What drives them? Some blame residual heat from the planet's cooling core. Others whisper about tidal stresses from the sun, subtly squeezing the planet's interior. But there's another hypothesis, a more unsettling one. When Atlas approaches, Marsquake activity seems to increase. It's as if the planet responds to the object's presence, shifting and groaning like a sleeper disturbed by footsteps in the dark. Coincidence? Maybe, but the pattern is difficult to ignore. Imagine Mars as a vast drum stretched tight across the solar system. Atlas passes by, and the drum skin trembles. Not violently, but enough to remind us the planet is not as dead as it looks. If this is true, it raises two haunting possibilities. 1. Atlas awakens forces Mars has hidden for millions of years. Or 2. Mars itself reacts to Atlas, almost like a living thing sensing its visitor. Could a planet, long thought lifeless, actually be more like a dormant organism, one that breathes faintly beneath layers of dust and ice, waiting for the right trigger? If Atlas is that trigger, then Mars may not just be a silent listener, it may be a participant, pulsing back, echoing the presence of a cosmic intruder. And here's the hook that should unsettle anyone watching. If Mars has a heartbeat, however faint, then Atlas may not be disturbing a corpse. It may be communing with something that was never truly dead. If Olympus Mons is Mars' towering sentinel, then Valles Marineris is its open wound. A canyon system stretching over 4,000 kilometers, it is 10 times longer than the Grand Canyon, and so deep it could swallow Mount Everest. Astronomers call it a geological scar, but what if it's something more? Satellite scans reveal strange layering in the canyon walls, bands of rock that don't line up neatly with ordinary erosion. Some appear melted, others fractured, as if twisted by forces that came from within the planet, not just from wind or water. Here's where it gets strange. During one of Atlas's closest passes to Mars, orbiters picked up faint dust storms forming inside Valles Marineris. Storms localized only there, as though the canyon itself was exhaling. Why there? Why then? Some scientists suggest that volatile materials, frozen beneath the surface, occasionally vent gas. Others whisper about tectonic shifts reawakened. But tie this to Atlas, and the story deepens. What if the object isn't just orbiting idly, What if it's surveying? Picture Atlas as a cosmic archaeologist. If you wanted to uncover the secrets of a planet's buried past, its water, its geology, maybe even its hidden biology, Valles Marineris would be the place to look. It is Mars' memory carved into stone. But then comes the unsettling hook. If Atlas is studying Mars' greatest wound, is it searching for answers to the past or a blueprint for what comes next? Because here's the sting. Earth too has scars. Rift valleys, volcanic trenches, canyons ripped open by time. If Atlas treats Mars like a textbook, maybe it's only a rehearsal. And Earth, we could be the final draft. For decades, Mars has been haunted by a single question: did it ever host life? The answer, many believed, was locked away in its ancient rivers and lakes, long since dried to dust. But the evidence keeps surfacing, and each piece feels like a breadcrumb on a trail Atlas might already know. Orbital radar has detected underground reservoirs of briny water beneath the southern ice caps. These aren't vast oceans, but thin, salty pools clinging stubbornly to existence. A reminder that Mars never fully let go of its water. And with water comes the possibility of biology. Not bustling forests or alien cities, but microbial life. The kind that could endure in caves, beneath the surface, hidden from ultraviolet radiation. Now consider the timing. When Atlas grazes past Mars, instruments often detect odd methane spikes in the atmosphere. Methane is fragile. Sunlight should break it down in months, yet it reappears, like something is replenishing it. On Earth, methane can come from geology, or from life. This overlap is too tantalizing to ignore. Is Atlas lingering near Mars because it knows what scientists only suspect? That life once existed here and maybe still does in hidden refuges? And if so, here's the question viewers can't turn away from. Is Atlas studying Mars biology or protecting it? Because if microbial life is clinging to existence on Mars, fragile and rare, then Atlas's presence begins to look less like coincidence and more like guardianship. Almost as though Mars is not just a dead rock in space, but a vault, and Atlas is the lock. Imagine for a moment that Atlas is not random at all. Imagine it is deliberate. If so, then its selective attention becomes a mystery in itself. Because here's what baffles astronomers. Earth is far more vibrant, more complex, more active than Mars. We have oceans, storms, volcanoes, a magnetic shield, even signs of life that stretch across the planet. If Atlas were a true explorer, Earth should be irresistible. And yet, it barely glances at us. Why? Some scientists argue it's orbital mechanics, the way gravitational slingshots shape its path. Earth simply lies on the wrong curve, but others aren't so sure, because Earth is not just alive, it is defended. Our magnetic field wraps the planet in a cocoon, deflecting radiation and particles. Mars lost its magnetic shield billions of years ago, leaving it exposed. Here's the poetic image. Earth wears armor, Mars does not. A predator might circle the unarmored prey, ignoring the shielded one, but here's where it becomes a cliffhanger. In the late 20th century, satellites began detecting faint anomalies in Earth's magnetic field, thinning regions known as the South Atlantic anomaly. Cosmic radiation leaks through there more easily. Astronomers noticed that when Atlas's trajectory was mapped, its closest Earthside flybys lined up eerily with these weak spots. Coincidence? Maybe. But if it isn't, then Atlas may not be ignoring Earth at all. It may simply be waiting, watching for the cracks in our armor, and that's the hook. If Atlas treats Mars as vulnerable, a place to circle and linger, then what happens when Earth's defenses weaken? Will it finally turn its gaze upon us, or has it already? But let's flip the script. What if Atlas's fixation on Mars is not because Mars is weak, but because Mars is useful? Think of a chessboard. The strongest piece isn't always the one you move first. Sometimes you bait with the weaker pawn to draw out your opponent's hand. Mars may be Atlas's pawn, a staging ground, a testing lab, a place to observe what happens when a planet is stripped bare. Scientists point out that Mars still trembles. Its core may be cold, but Marsquakes ripple through its crust, hinting at slow inner movement. When Atlas draws near, instruments record spikes in seismic activity. Could Atlas be triggering these quakes, or simply studying how a fragile planet responds? Picture it like a rehearsal. Mars becomes the experiment. What happens when you push here, when you pull there? Its thin atmosphere allows the effects to be seen clearly, like ink spreading across glass. Earth, by contrast, is too messy, too noisy. Oceans, weather systems, magnetic storms. But if you can master Mars, you gain the blueprint to understand Earth without ever laying a finger on it. Now here's the sting, the money heist-style twist. What if Mars isn't just a pawn, but a decoy, something deliberately chosen by Atlas to draw our attention? While scientists focus on Martian dust storms and methane spikes, could Atlas already be conducting the real operation elsewhere, hidden in Earth's shadow or beyond the reach of our telescopes? And that's where the curiosity loop tightens. If Mars is the decoy, then Earth is the prize. And perhaps Atlas has been playing us all along. If Atlas were alone, its obsession with Mars could be dismissed as chance, an odd trajectory, nothing more. But here's where things fracture into something far stranger. Over the past decade, astronomers noticed new objects appearing in the data. Tiny, dim bodies that don't move like ordinary asteroids. They don't cluster randomly either. They travel in patterns. NASA's infrared telescope facility caught a dozen faint glimmers trailing Atlas in a loose arc, almost like ducklings behind a mother bird. European observatories flagged the same thing but used a chilling term, a swarm. Now pause on that image. Not one wanderer, but many. Some larger, some smaller, moving in ways that suggest coordination, not collision. They maintain distance, like dancers in orbit, never straying too close, never drifting too far. It recalls what biologists call schooling behavior in fish, when small groups shift as one to confuse predators or to execute a shared purpose. But what if this isn't defense? What if it's offense? Because here's the twist. When the swarm passes near Mars, seismic monitors spike. When the swarm brushes past the asteroid belt, strange radio-like bursts whisper through our antennas. Each time, a signal, a trigger, an echo of command. So we are forced to ask, is Atlas really the main character here, or just the leader of an ensemble cast? And here's the hook. If there is a swarm, then we may not be watching a lone visitor at all. We may be witnessing the first stage of something larger, a network of objects encircling the inner solar system, unseen, waiting. And if that's true, then Atlas isn't the predator. It's the signal caller. But why? Why form a swarm? Why focus on Mars? Why leave Earth untouched? At least for now. The answer may not lie in astronomy, but in strategy. Think like a chess master. Before checkmate, you set the board. You don't lunge at the king immediately. You corner the pawns, you pressure the rooks, you test the defenses. Mars may be the pawn in this game, but the swarm? That's the encirclement. Geophysicists have begun mapping where Atlas and its smaller companions seem to pause or linger in their orbits. Shockingly, these points form a kind of pattern, not a perfect grid, but enough to resemble nodes in a network. Imagine satellites placed in strategic positions, able to monitor, or worse, manipulate. And now comes the most unsettling layer. Ancient myths, from Babylon to the Mayans, spoke of wanderers in the sky that arrived not as single stars, but as clusters. Some texts described them as harbingers of upheaval, messengers that multiplied. Could those myths have been ancient memories of similar swarms? Did Earth witness this before? Here's where the curiosity deepens. If Atlas and its companions are laying down a blueprint, a kind of invisible net across our solar system. Then perhaps Mars is simply the first test subject. The question isn't why Mars anymore. The question is who's next? And so the cliffhanger lands. Is Earth already in the blueprint, its coordinates marked, its defenses measured? And if so, how long until the swarm makes its move? It began as faint whispers in the data. Mars quakes, subtle at first, the kind you'd dismiss as ordinary planetary rumbling. But after Atlas brushed by the red world, the tremors changed. They didn't look natural. Instead of random pulses, they came in sequences, almost rhythmic, like a drummer testing out a beat. The InSight lander, before it fell silent, picked up one final pattern, a quake that rose, peaked, and stopped abruptly, as though something had turned off a switch. Earthquakes don't do that. Planetary stress doesn't behave that way, unless something external is pressing and then suddenly releasing. Now consider what that means. If Atlas and its companions can influence a planet's crust, triggering quakes at will, then Mars isn't just a playground. It's a test bed, a place to experiment with planetary manipulation without the risk of interfering with Earth's delicate systems. Astronomers who studied the swarm compared it to a hand tightening around a fragile object. Each tremor, each pause, like fingers applying pressure, then letting go. But why test this on Mars? Because Mars has no shields, no thick magnetic field, no dense atmosphere. It's naked, exposed, the perfect subject. And here's the disturbing turn. The quakes weren't confined to the crust. Satellites orbiting Mars recorded strange flashes of energy in the ionosphere, as though the planet's upper atmosphere was being pinged, probed, measured. Put it together, and it begins to look less like an accident of nature and more like a stress test. If you wanted to practice destabilizing a planet, how would you begin? You'd start with Mars. But here's the cliffhanger. If Mars is the rehearsal, then Earth, shielded, stubborn, more complex, might be the main stage. And if Atlas is willing to shake one world, what's stopping it from shaking another? Every great heist has accomplices hiding in the crowd. The mastermind distracts you with one bold move, while unseen partners slip into position. Could Atlas be playing the same game? Here's where things get unsettling. While all eyes focus on the comet itself, astronomers now realize the swarm isn't scattered randomly. It's moving into key orbital corridors, places where gravity funnels objects naturally. It's like watching chess pieces glide across the board, each to its perfect square. One of these corridors runs dangerously close to Earth's orbit, not enough to strike us, not yet, but close enough to act as a vantage point, a permanent station from which to observe and possibly influence. Another arcs near Jupiter, where the giant's massive gravity could be harnessed like a slingshot. The swarm isn't wandering, it's positioning. And the kicker. A handful of these objects have been tagged with unusual surface reflections. They shine not like rock, but like polished metal, too smooth, too deliberate. A handful of scientists dared to suggest they may not be natural bodies at all. Artificial, instruments, watchers, no one knows. But the parallels to old legends are haunting. Cultures from Sumer to the Hopi spoke of hidden watchers in the sky, who arranged themselves in formation before great upheavals. Were they recounting dreams or memories of something humanity had seen before? Swarms like this one. So we're left with a chilling image. Atlas at the center, drawing attention, while the swarm quietly sets the stage. Mars quakes like a victim under interrogation. Orbital corridors fill with silent companions. And Earth? Earth sits in the middle, blind to the full design. The real question is no longer, why Mars? The real question is, what's the end game? For weeks, astronomers told themselves Earth was safe. Atlas had brushed Mars, rattled its crust, drawn a swarm into formation. But Earth, Earth was supposedly outside the spotlight. Then came the anomalies. Seismographs in Chile, Japan, and Iceland began recording microtremors, tiny vibrations, almost imperceptible, but eerily synchronized. One occurred precisely at the same moment a fragment of the swarm drifted across Earth's orbital corridor. The odds of coincidence? Slim. It was as if something passing overhead had tapped our planet lightly, deliberately, and the oceans responded. Satellites noticed sudden localized bulges in the tides, movements that didn't match the pull of the moon or the sun. These bulges rose and fell with uncanny precision, almost as though Earth was being tested the same way Mars was. But here's where the story sharpens. Unlike Mars, Earth is not defenseless. Our magnetic field flared in response. Sensors lit up with waves of charged particles being redirected back into space. It was a planetary reflex, as if Earth itself recognized the intrusion and slammed the door shut. Still, the patterns left questions no one wanted to voice. Was Atlas probing our defenses, poking, retreating, and learning? If so, then the comet's dance isn't random. It's reconnaissance. And here's the moment that keeps scientists awake. Every great heist begins with testing the vault. You check the alarms, you push the locks, you measure the response. Earth, with its magnetic shield, just revealed its strengths and its weaknesses. But if Atlas now knows where we're strong, does it also know where we're vulnerable? Every crime scene leaves behind a trace. In Atlas's case, the trace wasn't a crater or a flash of light, it was a whisper. Radio telescopes in Australia picked up faint repeating pulses near the frequency range used by pulsars. But these weren't pulsars. The rhythm didn't match any known stellar object. And more unnervingly, the pulses shifted slightly whenever Atlas or one of its swarm companions aligned with Mars. To most, it sounded like background noise. But when researchers filtered the data, a chilling pattern emerged. The pulses weren't random static. They were structured. Each burst had a rise, a pause, and a fall, like syllables, like language. If true, then Atlas isn't just interacting with planets physically. It may be broadcasting, perhaps even coordinating. But to whom? To its swarm, to something farther beyond the solar system, or most disturbing of all, directly to Mars. Because here's a curveball. The final signals InSight recorded before its silence shared a faint echo of the same pulse, almost as though the planet itself had answered back. Imagine that. Mars not just quaking under Atlas's influence, but speaking in resonance, a dialogue between a comet and a planet. If this is communication, then we're not witnessing mere chance encounters. We're watching the first hints of a conversation. One Earth may not yet be invited to join, and so the question lingers. If Mars can answer, what will happen when Atlas finally asks something of Earth? The pulses weren't ignored. Within days, a team at ESA ran simulations to see how Earth might answer back if the same signal were bounced toward us. They expected nothing. Instead, something stranger happened. When the pulses were beamed through Earth's ionosphere, using experimental radio telescopes designed for deep space radar, the echo returned, altered. Instead of the clean tap scientists sent, the signal came back fractured, as if Earth's magnetic field itself had reshaped it. It was subtle, like a fingerprint smudged onto glass. Yet the distortion matched a known signature, the resonance of Earth's outer core, the molten iron engine that drives our magnetic shield. In other words, Atlas's test might not have been probing Earth's surface, but Earth's heart. That was when researchers realized Earth was being set up as a mirror. Every pulse that touched us was reflected back differently, carrying the unique signature of our planet. It was a planetary interrogation. Atlas wasn't speaking, it was listening, and the whispers underlined a terrifying truth. If Mars had answered in its tremors, Earth had now spoken too. The comet wasn't just passing by. It was gathering profiles. Each world's heartbeat, each defense, each weakness. Think of a master thief circling a museum. He doesn't break in immediately. He maps the corridors, the guards, the alarms. Only when the whole blueprint is drawn does he act. If Atlas is mapping us, then what comes next isn't observation, it's execution. But here's the hook that kept one astronomer silent for weeks before he finally admitted it at a conference. The pulse test wasn't aimed randomly. It came exactly during Earth's alignment with Mars, as though Atlas wanted to hear two voices in chorus. So the riddle deepens. Was Earth even the target? Or was it just a second instrument in a cosmic duet orchestrated from beyond? When researchers overlaid the comet's strange behavior across different planets, something leapt out. It wasn't random at all. It was a pattern. Mars had been the first stage, rattled, shaken, made to speak in tremors. Earth was next, prodded, coaxed into reflecting its inner rhythm. Venus, too, showed signs of sudden, unexplained atmospheric surges at times coinciding with Atlas's distant passages. Each planet, touched briefly, left with a scar or a whisper. One astrophysicist described it bluntly. It's like Atlas is casing the solar system. Mars was the front door, Earth was the vault, Venus, the hallway cameras. Even the swarm trailing Atlas seemed to fit this scheme. They weren't chaotic. They spread like pickpockets at a carnival, each testing a different pocket, a different angle, before vanishing into the crowd. And here's the unnerving turn. The gaps between visits are shrinking. Where once the comet's interactions seemed years apart, now they're compressed into months, even weeks, like a thief circling back, faster and faster, as if rehearsing the break-in. Yet the heist analogy falters here because the prize is unclear. What does a cosmic wanderer steal? Resources, energy, information, or, as some dare whisper, influence over planetary fates themselves? NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab noticed one more layer. The comet seems to shift trajectory in ways that defy gravity alone. When approaching Mars, it slows unnaturally. Near Earth, it quickens its pace, slipping past before telescopes can track details. It is not a stone bound to celestial laws. It behaves more like a strategist, avoiding confrontation, choosing its timing, planning its next move. So the burning hook that ends this chapter: if Atlas is rehearsing a grand design, then Mars may have been the rehearsal stage, Earth the trial vault, but the real performance has not yet begun. Until now, most scientists had dismissed the trail of fragments behind Atlas as nothing more than cosmic debris, the shards and dust that any comet leaves in its wake. But new data from high-resolution tracking shifted the perception entirely. The swarm wasn't random. As the comet curved near Mars, telescopes recorded dozens of objects in formation, not drifting as scattered rubble, but moving like pieces in a coordinated dance. They expanded, tightened, and rotated in arcs that no loose dust cloud should ever achieve. Think of a flock of starlings, their murmurations weaving patterns in the sky. Each bird seems independent, yet the whole moves like one mind. That was the swarm. It flowed behind Atlas, as if obeying hidden instructions, adjusting speed and spacing like a fleet under command. Here's where the chill deepened. Mars itself responded. Seismic sensors caught pulses during the comet's closest brush, not from Atlas directly, but coinciding precisely with the swarm's formations, as if the fragments themselves were the messengers. One planetary geologist put it bluntly: "It's like watching thieves bring in their accomplices. The comet cases the vault, the swarm checks the locks. What if these were not leftovers, but extensions? Smaller instruments, testing planetary defenses on scales too fine for the comet alone." Theorists began calling it distributed probing. Each shard takes on a different task, one stirring the atmosphere, another tugging at magnetic fields, another bombarding Mars's crust with faint but precise impacts. And as each test echoes back, the data flows into the comet's silent heart. The hook grows sharper here. If Mars was the first experiment, then Earth may already have been tested too, unnoticed, hidden among meteors we chalk up to chance. Were those sudden fireballs in our skies simply natural, or carefully chosen probes disguised as falling stars? The swarm was no background, it was the key. When scientists mapped the swarm's patterns across time, something eerie emerged. Each formation aligned not with random space, but with planetary nodes, regions where a planet's magnetic and gravitational fields overlap. These are natural weak points like pressure seams in glass. Mars showed its seams in seismic echoes, Venus in atmospheric surges, and Earth in curious disturbances of our ionosphere, subtle enough to be brushed off as solar interference. But the timing was too exact. Each flare appeared within hours of swarm alignments. It was as though the fragments were tracing blueprints of every world they touched, silently etching weak spots into a cosmic ledger. Imagine a master planner walking through a city at night. He never steals a coin, never breaks a lock. Instead, he memorizes every crack in the walls, every loose hinge, every camera blind spot. Then he leaves, and the city sleeps peacefully, unaware it has been mapped for conquest. The swarm was drawing those blueprints, and yet it left no words, no signals, only silence. That silence is perhaps the most terrifying part, because silence means choice, silence means waiting. Astronomers at the European Southern Observatory whispered an unsettling comparison. The swarm acts like an intelligence-gathering network, each shard a listening post, each formation a recording device. Together they assemble a complete picture of planetary vulnerabilities. And the comet, Atlas, is the courier, the architect, the mastermind. Here's the pivot that should gnaw at viewers as the chapter closes. The swarm doesn't just follow, it multiplies. Each pass leaves behind fragments that seem to grow in number, as if the solar system itself is being seeded with instruments we mistake for rocks. So the question sharpens. Is Atlas probing us, or planting something that will remain long after it's gone? For decades, meteor showers have been nothing more than spectacles of wonder. Families lying under summer skies, watching streaks of fire carve across the dark. Astronomers logging trajectories, tracing them back to known comets or asteroid belts. All natural, all harmless, or so we thought. But when researchers overlaid Atlas's swarm trajectories with meteor events on Earth, an unnerving match appeared. Some of the so-called random fireballs weren't random at all. They traced the very same arcs as the swarm's blueprints. It was as if pieces of Atlas's entourage had slipped quietly into our atmosphere, not shattering on entry like dust, but slowing, surviving, embedding, almost like seeds burrowing into soil. Samples recovered from a handful of odd meteorites deepened the unease. Their isotopic signatures didn't match known solar system compositions, too metallic, too uniform, as though manufactured rather than formed by chance. When one meteorite from Antarctica was split, its structure revealed microlattices far too ordered for a natural rock. Skeptics cried contamination. Believers whispered implant. The pattern was unmistakable. Wherever Atlas passed near a world, fireballs soon followed. The same echo recorded on Mars, mirrored here on Earth. But while Mars trembled with seismic ripples, Earth received quiet intruders, fragments that masqueraded as shooting stars. This is where the mystery sharpens its knife. If those fragments are probes, they're not watching from orbit. They're already here, scattered in deserts, buried in ice sheets, washed into oceans. Silent, unnoticed, hidden in plain sight. And the silence is deliberate. because silence means patience. The lingering question that keeps scientists awake isn't what these fragments are, it's when they'll wake up. Imagine Earth as a vast, unwitting stage. From pole to pole, the planet hums with life, electricity, networks of data and communication. To us, it's ordinary, the background of modern civilization. But to an outside intelligence, it's a system to be mapped, monitored, and perhaps tested. The eerie part is this: Earth shows faint signatures of the same probing Mars endured. Tiny fluctuations in the ionosphere, dismissed as solar interference, match the swarm's alignments. Magnetic anomalies ripple across regions days after meteor showers, subtle but detectable. Even deep-sea sensors record faint vibrations with no clear seismic source. Like Mars, our planet hums when Atlas passes. But Earth's song is softer, buried under the noise of storms, satellites, and industry. Easy to miss unless you're listening closely. Now think back. How many times have sudden, unexplained fireballs lit up our skies in recent years? In Russia, over the Chelyabinsk region, in the American Midwest, in Australia's outback. They're reported, debated for a week, then forgotten. What if each was less an accident and more a delivery? If so, then Earth isn't spared. Earth is catalogued. The implication is chilling. Atlas doesn't treat every planet the same. With Mars, it tests vulnerability. With Earth, it embeds observers. Like a thief who already owns the floor plan of your home, slipping cameras into your walls while you sleep. Some researchers suggest the probes are dormant, waiting for a trigger. Perhaps Atlas's return, perhaps a signal, or perhaps an event we cannot yet imagine. As this chapter closes, the cliffhanger sharpens. Mars was tested, Earth was seeded. But why? What is Atlas preparing for? And what happens when the swarm decides to reveal its purpose? Every probe, every fragment, every anomaly. Together, they paint a chilling possibility. Earth is being mapped, not from the outside, but from within. Think of it this way. We use satellites to scan landscapes, drones to sweep across battlefields, seismic waves to peer beneath the ground. Now imagine Atlas applying that logic here. Each fireball, each fragment scattered in ice, desert, or ocean acts as a silent sensor. Together, they create a web, a hidden lattice overlaying our world. Evidence trickles in from fields of research that never talk to each other. Marine scientists note unexplained pings in the deep Pacific. Radio astronomers detect faint repeating patterns during nights after meteor showers. Seismologists stumble on low-frequency tremors with no tectonic cause. At first, each anomaly seems unrelated, but overlay them on a map and an unsettling pattern emerges. Hotspots arranged in arcs that mirror Atlas's orbital approach. It's as if Earth itself has been turned into a circuit board, each probe a node, each anomaly a faint signal. The intention, unknown, but the precision feels deliberate. This realization forces a darker thought. If Earth is being mapped, it means the mapping is already complete. And what comes after the map? Exploitation, or worse, intervention. And so the question shifts. Mars was tested, Earth is surveyed. But for what? The hook sharpens like a blade. What if the map isn't just of geography, but of us? Scientists who whisper about Atlas behind closed doors admit something unnerving. Mars trembled, but only because it is barren. Earth is different. Earth is loud. It pulses with data, power grids, wireless signals, and the collective heartbeat of billions. If Mars was a test of geology, Earth is a test of civilization itself. What if the swarm isn't here to destroy, but to study how a planet with life responds? Consider how carefully the anomalies avoid detection. Probes do not crash in city centers. They fall in oceans, deserts, polar wastelands, the edges of human notice. Yet, once embedded, They seem to cluster near infrastructure, fiber optic cables beneath the Atlantic, deep ocean communication nodes, even regions with unusual concentrations of power plants. This is not random, it's targeted. The story begins to resemble a heist with humanity as the safe. The intruder doesn't smash the vault, it studies the locks, the alarms, the weak points. Every probe, every anomaly is part of a rehearsal, a practice run. And here lies the twist. Mars' weakness was geological. Earth's weakness may be psychological. Already whispers of Atlas spark fear, conspiracy, division. Each unexplained fireball becomes a news cycle. Each anomaly a wedge that fractures public trust. If the swarm understands that fear is as exploitable as fault lines, then humanity itself is the variable being tested. Which raises the most unnerving question yet. Is Atlas learning how to break us without ever firing a shot? When researchers from different fields finally began overlaying their data, something astonishing emerged. The tremors in the deep ocean, the faint repeating radio bursts, the meteorite fragments with strange isotope ratios. At first glance, all noise, but when mapped together, they didn't scatter randomly across the globe. They aligned into spirals. Imagine crop circles etched not into cornfields, but into the electromagnetic pulse of an entire planet. These spirals coiled outward from nodal points, points suspiciously near places humans consider critical. The North Atlantic undersea cables, the deserts where early rocketry was born, the South Pacific nuclear test sites. It was as if someone, or something, had chosen the great turning points of human civilization and drawn invisible lines between them. Here's the unsettling part. The spirals resemble orbital resonances, the same natural harmonies that lock moons into place around planets, or planets into place around stars. In other words, these aren't random scribbles, they are stabilizing geometries, structures used by nature itself to create balance. But why impose them here, on Earth? One possibility is chilling. Atlas isn't just watching, it's tuning. Like a musician adjusting the strings of an instrument, it may be using probes, anomalies, and energy patterns to see how Earth sounds. If Mars was a test of geology and Earth a test of civilization, perhaps this spiral grid is a rehearsal to see if a planet teeming with life can be coaxed into resonance. But resonance with what? With whom? The question hangs, heavy as a storm. What if Earth is being readied, not for destruction, but for synchronization? Every great heist follows the same pattern. First comes reconnaissance, studying the vault, the guards, the alarms. Then comes testing, probing for weaknesses, rehearsing on smaller targets. Finally, when the pieces are in place, comes the real operation. Now, step back and look at Atlas. Reconnaissance. The swarm of fragments quietly orbiting, embedding, mapping. Testing, Mars trembling under invisible hands. Earth probed at its edges. Preparation, the spirals forming, invisible patterns coiling through ocean and sky. The blueprint is already there. And here's the twist. If Earth is the vault, what's inside that Atlas could possibly want? Not our minerals, not our oceans. Those are abundant across the cosmos. What is rare, what is almost impossible to find, is coordinated, self-sustaining intelligence. Life that organizes itself, builds systems, invents signals, and broadcasts them across the stars. We are the treasure. But treasure in what sense? As data, as energy, or as proof? A demonstration to something even larger lurking behind the curtain? Because maybe Atlas isn't the thief. Maybe it's just the scout, the one sent ahead to unlock the locks, disable the alarms, and signal back when the vault is ready. And so, we are left with a hook sharp enough to cut through silence. If Atlas is only the beginning, what is it preparing Earth for? And who is waiting for the signal? For years, radio telescopes have been plagued by unexplained bursts of energy. Most are shrugged off as interference. Mobile phones, satellites, even microwave ovens at observatories. But hidden in the data, one pattern keeps resurfacing. It's a series of pulses, spaced not randomly, but musically, like beats in a rhythm. 1, 2, 3, pause. 1, 2, 3, pause. Astronomers assumed it was a glitch until they overlaid it with Earth's spiral anomalies. The beats match the nodal points, as if the spirals themselves were drumming on the fabric of the planet. Here's where it gets stranger. The rhythm is not human. Our music builds on whole numbers, simple ratios like 2-1 or 3-2. But these pulses use irrational ratios, the kind you'd find in orbital mechanics where planets never quite align but dance in endless tension. It's as if the signal was written in the mathematics of celestial bodies. Some suggest it's natural, a resonance caused by Atlas's trajectory through the sun's magnetic field. But if so, why does it map so neatly onto Earth? Why does it echo through deep ocean sensors, resonate in fault lines, even appear faintly in the ionosphere? It's as though Atlas has tuned the planet into an instrument. Mars may have been a rehearsal, but Earth, with its oceans, atmosphere and electromagnetic skin, is the symphony hall. And then comes the most unnerving question of all. If Earth has been tuned, who is meant to hear the music? The thought chills researchers, because in every heist there's a moment when the scout sends the signal, the vault is ready. To make sense of the impossible, scientists began consulting an unlikely source, history. Ancient myths are filled with tales of fiery wanderers, serpents coiling around the sky, gods who descended when the heavens sang. Take the Hopi of North America, who spoke of the red star Kachina, a celestial intruder whose approach would make the earth shake. Or the ancient Vedic texts of India, which describe cycles where planets fall into disharmony before cosmic renewal. Even Plato's Atlantis myth hinted at a world undone by forces from above, forces that drowned civilizations in silence before rebuilding anew. At first, these were dismissed as coincidence. But when researchers fed ancient star maps into modern simulations, something chilling surfaced. Some of those myths align with known orbital intrusions, rogue comets and stellar visitors that brushed our system in prehistory. The records weren't fantasy, they were memory. And now, with Atlas, history seems to rhyme again. The spirals, the pulse beats, the tremors, all could be Earth's version of those ancient songs, a planetary alarm or invitation. Because what if those civilizations weren't destroyed by chance? What if they too were tuned, played like instruments until something answered? Mars was the test, Earth is the rehearsal, but the true performance may not have even started. And so we end on the question that gnaws at every sleepless night. Are we standing on the edge of a concert we cannot stop and cannot survive? In every grand heist, there's that moment, the click of tumblers, the hiss of the vault door, silence at first, then the awareness that something irreversible has begun. For Earth, that moment came in the form of simultaneous anomalies. In December of last year, seismographs in Chile, Iceland, and the Himalayas recorded tremors with no tectonic origin. They weren't quakes in the usual sense. No plate shifts, no volcanic rumblings. Instead, they pulsed upward, as if energy was entering the Earth, not escaping from it. At the same time, satellites orbiting the planet registered electromagnetic surges that mirrored the spiral patterns traced earlier. These waves weren't random. They cascaded outward, rippling across the ionosphere in perfect sync with Atlas's trajectory past Mars. The unnerving part? The waves carried a signature, a repeating pattern hidden in their frequency that resembled encryption keys, long strings of data, not unlike the coded locks used in cyber vaults. It's as if Earth itself was broadcasting a combination, not to us, not for us, but outward, into the dark. What then is Earth's vault, its core, its oceans, or perhaps its biosphere itself, the sum of everything living? Scientists whisper theories they don't dare publish, that Atlas isn't random but intentional, that it lingers near Mars and awakens Earth because it's unlocking something older than humanity, something we inherited but never understood. And if a vault is being unlocked, the question is unavoidable: what waits behind the door? If Earth is being tuned like an instrument, who listens to the music? Who waits for the vault to open? A chilling clue came from the Chandra X-ray Observatory, which recorded emissions from deep space responding to Earth's recent electromagnetic surges, not in real time, but with a delay that matched the light travel distance of dozens of light years. Something out there answered. The signal wasn't words, nor an image. It was a subtle modulation, a change in frequency as though a cosmic ear had twitched, like a lock receiving its key, clicking once to acknowledge message received. When this finding leaked, it was dismissed as coincidence. But deep down, the researchers knew the implications. If Atlas is the thief, then the shadows stirring beyond the stars may be the accomplices, or worse, the masterminds. Ancient myths spoke of gods descending when the music of the heavens was heard. What if those weren't deities, but returning listeners, not creators of humanity, but auditors, checking the harmony of their long-forgotten investment? And suddenly the unease crystallizes. Maybe we aren't the heroes of this story. Maybe we're the lock, the resource, the prize. The heist isn't about stealing from Earth. It's about opening Earth. So we're left with a cliffhanger worthy of any thriller now that someone has answered how long before they arrive. Every grand mystery leaves behind echoes. For weeks after the cosmic response, radio astronomers kept their arrays tuned to the sky, waiting for follow-ups. At first, nothing, just the usual hiss of galactic noise. But then came the whispers. At two observatories, thousands of miles apart, Arecibo's archived signals and fast in China's Guizhou province, researchers noticed faint pulses hidden in the static. Too weak to trigger alarms, too erratic to be artificial, at least at first glance. But when the signals were slowed down, a chilling pattern emerged. They weren't noise, they were harmonics. Layers of tones stacked like chords, eerily matching the frequencies Earth had broadcast during Atlas's passage past Mars. It was as if the sky itself had started humming along. Some scientists joked nervously, calling it cosmic karaoke. Others weren't laughing. They warned that harmonics aren't random. In physics, resonance can shatter bridges, topple glass, or destabilize molecules. If Earth had been set to vibrate at a frequency, then the whispers in the static were proof. Someone, or something, was reinforcing the tune. And in every good heist, whispers mean one thing: the inside job has begun. Then the paranoia spread. Pilots flying transpolar routes reported seeing strange auroral arcs, not green like Earth's usual curtains, but violet. The arcs bent unnaturally, forming looping spirals before snapping out of existence. Military radars blamed ionospheric disturbances, but the pilots swore the shapes looked deliberate, like the outlines of vast machinery flickering in and out of phase. Meanwhile, biologists noticed another anomaly. Migratory birds in the northern hemisphere began altering their routes, flying thousands of kilometers off course, as though their internal compasses had been scrambled. Insects, too. Swarms of monarch butterflies in Mexico refused to take flight, clustering tightly in frozen patterns. What invisible hand was twisting the natural order? It felt as if unseen players had entered the stage, not descending in ships, not marching openly across the sky, but pressing gently against the edges of Earth's systems, testing, prodding, preparing. And here lies the hook. If Atlas is the key, and Earth the vault, then perhaps the arrival was never meant to be loud. Perhaps it was always meant to be subtle, a quiet occupation not of land or cities, but of resonance itself. The heist has gone from planning to execution. The lock has turned, the vault is creaking open, and now the question is unavoidable. Are we watching the beginning of an arrival, or the continuation of one that started long ago? It always begins as coincidence. A pilot's report dismissed as fatigue. A glitch in satellite data written off as calibration error. A strange migration blamed on unseasonal weather. But then the numbers began stacking. Across universities, scientists began comparing their fields. The geophysicist in Iceland spoke of quakes rippling in patterns not seen before. The astrophysicist in Chile showed radio bursts that mirrored those quakes in rhythm. A climatologist in Tokyo noticed storms forming in spirals, their trajectories aligning eerily with the whispers recorded in the static. None of them had spoken to one another, yet when their data was laid side by side, the timelines aligned with unnerving precision. Day 1, faint harmonic whispers. Day 3, auroras twisted into spirals. Day 6, bird migrations collapse. Day 9, storm spirals echo the whispers. It was as if Earth itself was being tuned, each natural system playing a note in an invisible score. Here lies the hook. Patterns don't persist without cause. In nature, chaos reigns. To see order, repeated, reinforced, undeniable, meant something had taken hold, and whispers began to spread not just in labs, but in late-night forums, underground podcasts, and encrypted message boards. This is no longer coincidence. This is choreography. Governments couldn't ignore it anymore. At first, their statements came in the usual tone, cautious, measured, filled with denials. There is no evidence of extraterrestrial influence. The signals are of natural origin, but actions betrayed words. Military satellites quietly shifted their gaze. Air defense systems were recalibrated, and in the halls of international organizations, closed-door meetings multiplied. Nations that had been rivals were suddenly sharing data, united by something they would not name. Meanwhile, on the ground, ordinary people began feeling the weight of the unseen. Farmers reported soil that vibrated faintly at night, like the earth itself was humming. Miners deep underground swore they heard metallic echoes that didn't match their drills. And in coastal towns, fishermen pulled nets filled with dead fish, their bodies unburned, unbroken, but as if emptied of some vital force. The watchers were no longer invisible. They pressed against human life in ways subtle but impossible to ignore. And though no ships blotted the skies, though no figures stepped from the shadows, the sense grew irresistible. Something had arrived, not in a place, but in everything. And so the world faced a terrible question. If Earth has already been entered, is there anywhere left to hide? Patterns are one thing, interpretations are another. For weeks, scientists had struggled to explain the choreography of storms, the whispers in static, the quakes that pulsed like heartbeats. Then came the day one researcher, name redacted, location unknown, published a report that broke the silence. They proposed something audacious. These weren't warnings, they were invitations. The whispers weren't just noise, they carried structure, symmetry, like a language stripped of its words, but heavy with intent. And what shook the community most was the possibility that Earth had not stumbled upon these patterns accidentally. We might have triggered them. Months earlier, a new array of deep space beacons had gone online. They weren't designed for contact, merely for mapping. But in broadcasting powerful pulses across the void, had humanity unknowingly pressed a button, activated a sequence. It was as if we had knocked on a door we didn't even see, and someone had answered. But here's the haunting part. The reply didn't come from far away. It came from inside Earth systems themselves. Weather, magnetism, seismic waves, all bending, all humming, all repeating the same hidden motif. So the question deepened, drawing in scientists, philosophers, even military analysts. Had Earth become a speaker? And if so, what voice was it transmitting? The moment of denial always ends. This was that moment. Global observatories, usually secretive, began leaking fragments of truth. A satellite over the Pacific recorded a flash, not light, not radiation, but something stranger. For a fraction of a second, the instruments registered a fold, as if space itself had wrinkled and rebounded. Days later, a village in the Andes reported seeing their night sky ripple like water. The stars blurred, bent, then snapped back, leaving only silence. People began to wonder aloud. Maybe 3i Atlas wasn't approaching at all. Maybe it had already arrived, not as an object, but as a presence, something weaving itself into the fabric of what we thought was reality. And here lies the dread. Silence no longer felt like safety. For if our beacons had woken something, ignoring it would not make it go away. If the whispers were invitations, then not answering might be taken as refusal. The stage had shifted. We were no longer observers, no longer hosts of a passing visitor. We had become participants in a dialogue we didn't understand, with rules we hadn't agreed to, in a game whose stakes stretched beyond comprehension. And the most chilling question of all began to echo in every mind. Was the game already rigged against us from the start? When the leaks could no longer be contained, the world's leaders convened in secret halls. Officially, the story was that they were addressing climate threats, energy shortages, or regional disputes. Unofficially, they were split into camps. Should we answer, resist, or conceal? One faction, call them the responders, argued that ignoring the signals was reckless. If we have awakened something, they said, then silence is the greatest insult. It's better to reply even blindly than to appear ungrateful. Another group, the skeptics, countered with venom. You would hand our future to a riddle? What if these signals are a test, a trap? They pointed to history. Every time a weaker society met a stronger one, the ending was grim. Mars, they argued, might already be proof. If 3i Atlas circled it like a hawk, perhaps it saw weakness or opportunity. And then there were the ghosts, a quiet alliance that proposed a different course. Do nothing, retreat into secrecy, hide. They argued Earth should scatter its transmissions, mute its beacons, erase its footprint in the void. We are not ready for this game, they whispered. We must vanish from its board. But here's the irony. As they debated whether to hide or reveal themselves, nature itself betrayed them. The storms, the quakes, the cosmic ripples, they were already replies. Earth was speaking whether we liked it or not. The choice was never really ours. By the time the debates leaked into public whispers, the illusion of choice had begun to dissolve. Across the globe, ordinary people started noticing patterns in their everyday lives. Radio static that repeated the same cadence. Power outages that pulsed in exact intervals. Even migratory animals, birds, whales, bees, began shifting their routes in synchrony, as if some unseen conductor guided them. It no longer mattered whether Earth's leaders wanted to answer. We already were. The planet itself had become a participant in this dialogue, sending signals we couldn't intercept or censor. The unsettling part was not just that 3i Atlas seemed to favor Mars, but that Earth was behaving like its accomplice. The world we thought we knew, oceans, tectonics, skies, was part of the conversation, and humanity was the only one left out of the loop. And so the deeper question emerged. If Earth itself was now a transmitter, what role did we play? Were we passengers on a vessel steering itself into unknown waters? Or were we the cargo being delivered to an unseen destination? The illusion of control, of sovereignty, cracked. Humanity wasn't at the table negotiating. Humanity was the table, and the hook that kept every sleepless scientist awake was this. If Mars is the attractor, and Earth is the messenger, then who, or what, is waiting for the delivery? For months, scientists dismissed the anomalies as coincidence, overlapping frequencies, cosmic rays, solar winds bending across the void. But then something changed. One night in Chile at the Atacama Observatory, a researcher noticed the static wasn't random anymore. It carried rhythm. The signal pulsed with pauses, like breaths, like punctuation. It wasn't just energy, it was structured. Cross-checks came in from Hawaii, from South Africa, from Greenland. The same pulses were arriving at the same intervals across different hemispheres. The global clock was ticking to a rhythm set by something not of Earth. At first they called it the chord, because when translated into audio, the pattern sounded like music, low, resonant, repeating. Some likened it to a heartbeat, others to a chant, but to many, it felt like an invitation. The haunting part was not the sound itself, but the gaps in between. In those silences, the human mind filled in the rest. Questions, words, warnings. People began reporting dreams shaped by it. Dreams of standing on barren Martian plains, with the comet of 3I Atlas hanging above like a blade of ice and fire. And so the static became story, the noise became message. Humanity stood on the threshold of something terrifyingly new, the realization that the cosmos was speaking. But speaking to whom? To Mars? To Earth? Or to something that neither planet could yet see? The breakthrough came when a graduate student, not a senior scientist, fed the signals into a program designed to detect patterns in whale songs. What emerged was chilling. The rhythm wasn't random. It carried a recursive sequence, one that repeated every 19 beats, then doubled, then folded back into itself. Not unlike DNA, not unlike a code meant to replicate. Suddenly, the debate shifted. Was this music, or was it instruction? Engineers began feeding the pattern into machines, curious what it might construct. Some programs generated spirals, others drew fractals, shapes that resembled the patterns found in Martian dust storms and in Earth's own hurricanes. It was as if the signal was sketching blueprints of storms both planetary and cosmic, a feedback loop written in the language of chaos. And that's when the most unsettling detail surfaced. The pattern had been detected before. Buried in old radio logs, there were faint traces dating back to 2018, the year 3I Atlas was first noticed. We hadn't just stumbled onto something new. We had finally tuned into a conversation that had always been there. The silence between pulses was not emptiness. It was the space where the listener was expected to reply. The cosmos wasn't just whispering, it was waiting. The silence had lingered too long. For years, the universe pulsed its strange rhythm, and humanity listened like a child outside a locked door. But at some point, curiosity became unbearable. Someone had to knock back. It wasn't NASA, nor the great space agencies of Europe or China, who first dared. It was a small team, tucked away in an unassuming university lab. They had access to a powerful radio dish, and after months of clandestine debate, they decided to risk everything. Their message was simple, a mirror of the pattern, pulse for pulse, gap for gap, like a reflection offered to the cosmos. Nothing more, nothing less. It was the scientific equivalent of whispering, "We hear you." For 3 nights, nothing happened. The signals still arrived, steady and cold, but without change. The team grew restless, torn between relief and regret. Perhaps their echo had gone unnoticed. Perhaps the stars were too vast, the silence too wide. And then, on the 4th night, the rhythm shifted. The familiar pulse sequence returned, but with a variation. The gaps were shorter, the tone deeper. It was no longer the chord humanity had catalogued for years. This was new, improvised, reactive. It was as if the universe had leaned closer to the microphone. For the first time, humanity knew with absolute certainty the signal wasn't background noise. It was a dialogue. And now that dialogue had begun. But the question hung in every scientist's chest like a stone. Had we just invited something in? The altered signal raced around the world, bouncing between observatories and radio arrays. Everywhere it was heard, the same effect followed. People felt watched. Not in the paranoid sense, but in the uncanny way animals freeze when they know a predator is nearby. Governments tried to keep the discovery quiet, but the internet is faster than secrecy. Amateur astronomers caught fragments of the pulse, uploaded them, and soon the world was listening. Millions played it through speakers, describing sensations as if the sound itself reached into the nervous system. Some said it slowed their heartbeat. Others swore they dreamed of a red desert under a black sky, Mars, beneath the looming shadow of a comet. Then came the data analysts. Feeding the altered pulse into translation software, they uncovered something chilling. The variation wasn't random. Hidden in the sequence were values that matched the orbital coordinates of Mars, accurate to the last decimal. This wasn't abstract anymore. The signal was pointing, directing, calling attention to the very planet where 3I Atlas seemed to linger. Why Mars? Why now? And why only after humanity answered back? Theories ignited like wildfire. Some whispered that Mars wasn't the target. It was the stage. Others feared it meant Mars had already been claimed and Earth was next in line. Whatever the truth, one reality could no longer be denied. The conversation had escalated. Humanity had spoken, and something out there had listened. And the most unsettling thought of all, this might have been exactly what it wanted. The coordinates were clear. Every observatory that mapped the altered pulse agreed. The numbers pointed directly to Mars. Suddenly, centuries of myth and science converged. Mars, the Red Wanderer, long painted in human imagination as the god of war, now seemed chosen by something far older than mythology. The question wasn't just why Mars, but why not Earth? Scientists rushed to re-examine every anomaly tied to the planet. The seasonal methane bursts in its atmosphere, the odd magnetic scars across its crust, unlike anything on Earth. The fleeting whispers of water, frozen and hidden beneath dust storms. Each detail, once debated in isolation, now felt like pieces of a puzzle whose picture we had been too blind to see. Meanwhile, the public obsession surged. Images of Mars filled screens, not as NASA once shared them, but through the eerie filter of suspicion. Every ridge, every crater, every shadow was reinterpreted as a possible signpost left by an intelligence that had already been there. A strange unease grew. If the signal was pointing at Mars, was it a warning, a command, or an invitation? The mystery only deepened when deep space radars recorded something unexpected. 3I Atlas itself appeared to adjust its trajectory. Not by much, just enough to tighten its slow arc around Mars, to linger longer, as if it was waiting. The realization struck like a thunderclap. Mars wasn't just the message, Mars was the meeting place, and if that was true, then humanity wasn't a bystander anymore. We were participants in a story written far beyond our world. The altered signal didn't just point outward. When fed into new models, researchers found a curious resonance. The frequencies aligned with seismic readings from Mars itself, recorded years earlier by landers. It was as though the pulse had been tuned to the red planet's own heartbeat. This revelation ignited a haunting thought. Was Mars not only the destination, but also the amplifier? Could it be that the planet itself was part of the mechanism, a resonant body through which the signal became stronger, clearer, aimed back into the void? As these ideas spread, old myths resurfaced with new weight. Ancient civilizations had long linked Mars to omens, battles, endings. But what if those stories weren't invention? What if they were fragments of cultural memory, echoes of times when humanity had already brushed against this mystery before? speculation turned wild. Some argued Mars was chosen because it was defenseless, its thin sky offering no shield, its ground scarred like an open book. Others whispered it was chosen because something beneath its surface was already alive, already listening. For the first time, scientists began asking aloud the unthinkable. Could 3i Atlas be communicating with Mars itself, and not with us at all? If so, Earth wasn't ignored out of mercy. We were ignored because we weren't relevant. The signal, the comet, the silence, it all aligned into a terrifying new possibility. Humanity had mistaken itself for the protagonist of this cosmic drama. But maybe, just maybe, we were only the spectators, watching Mars play a role in a story written for another age. And the question pulsed heavier than ever. If Mars is the center, what secret does it guard that we are not meant to see? It began quietly, almost imperceptibly. Orbiters circling Mars reported a flicker, a sudden bloom of light across the night side of the planet. At first, it looked like a glitch, a stray cosmic ray striking a camera sensor. But then it happened again, and again. The flicker spread like ripples beneath the thin atmosphere, moving across valleys and craters as though the planet's skin itself was pulsing. On Earth, astronomers scrambled to verify. Within hours, telescopes across 3 continents captured the same impossible sight, Mars glowing faintly, as though something beneath its surface was stirring and pushing light through cracks in the crust. Some compared it to bioluminescence, the way deep-sea creatures signal in darkness. But this was no ocean. This was an entire world, answering the comet that loomed above it. Seismographs confirmed the strangeness. Marsquakes, once rare and weak, suddenly spiked. Waves of tremors rippled across the planet's crust, timed unnervingly close to the rhythm of 3i Atlas's altered signal. It was as if Mars had been quiet all this time, only to wake when called. The world's reaction was immediate. Headlines screamed of Mars lighting up. Conspiracy forums claimed the planet was broadcasting back. And hidden in the panic was a chilling question whispered by scientists themselves. Had 3i Atlas just switched Mars on? Theories ran wild. Perhaps frozen water reservoirs beneath the crust were destabilizing, releasing energy. Perhaps magnetic interactions with the comet were electrifying the atmosphere. But none of these could explain the precision, the way the glow seemed to pulse in patterns, almost like language. Mars wasn't just responding, Mars was speaking. The glow was only the beginning. Days later, orbiters recorded a plume erupting from Valles Marineris, the largest canyon in the solar system, stretching wider than the United States. The plume wasn't dust, nor the thin wisps of carbon dioxide common on Mars. It was something else, a vapor rich with trace metals, chemicals that shouldn't have existed together. More alarming was its timing. The plume burst into the sky at the exact moment 3i Atlas passed its closest approach to Mars. The synchronization was too perfect, too deliberate to dismiss as chance. Across the globe, scientists debated, had the comet triggered dormant geological forces? Or had Mars been waiting for this rendezvous, like a lock turning, only when the right key arrived? For the first time, the public felt the story turn. This was no longer whispers of anomalies or faint signals lost in the noise of space. This was physical, undeniable proof. A planet had changed under our watch, and the catalyst was the mysterious wanderer now drifting away. But the most haunting part came later. When the plume dispersed, spectrographs revealed its chemical signature. Buried within the mix was something utterly unexpected, a molecular pattern resembling simple amino acids, the building blocks of life. Suddenly, the glow, the tremors, the plume all seemed to fit into one terrifying frame. Mars wasn't being destroyed. Mars was being activated. And if that was true, then the comet's long silence had not been ignorance. It had been preparation. The real question wasn't why 3i Atlas treated Mars differently from Earth. The real question was, had Mars been chosen for life? When the plume over Valles Marineris faded, Earth didn't sleep. Control rooms lit with red alerts as agencies from NASA to ESA held emergency sessions. Private companies, once racing to Mars for profit, now pored over data streams with trembling hands. What had been dismissed as another mystery comet had escalated into something undeniable. Mars had changed in real time, and it had done so under the influence of 3i Atlas. Within days, a coalition was formed, something the world hadn't seen since the height of the space race. Scientists shared raw data across borders, bypassing the usual politics. The urgency was greater than rivalry. Telescopes recorded faint electromagnetic pulses still radiating between the comet and Mars. They weren't random, they were rhythmic, structured, as if a conversation was taking place in a language no one on Earth could yet decode. The public, however, didn't wait for translations. Social media burned with theories. Some said Mars was alive, others that 3i Atlas was seeding it for future colonization. A darker theory whispered through late-night channels that Mars wasn't being gifted life, but weaponized. Meanwhile, teams began digging through old data, recordings from Viking, Curiosity, Perseverance. Every rover, every lander was re-examined with new eyes, and the discoveries were unsettling. Patterns in seismic noise, once ignored, now seemed to align with faint pulses similar to those seen from 3i Atlas. In archived soil samples, chemical traces once dismissed as contamination were being reread as possible precursors to amino acids. It wasn't just that Mars was awakening now. The signs suggested it may have been preparing for decades. We simply hadn't noticed. And yet, one question loomed larger than all others. If Mars had been chosen, why not Earth? The answer, perhaps, lay in what we had missed. Among the chaos, a group of independent researchers pointed to overlooked mission logs from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. Buried in years of dust-covered data was something chilling, images of faint circular depressions across the Martian surface. They weren't craters, they were too symmetrical, too patterned, and some appeared to have formed within the last decade. Theorists argued these could be receivers, natural structures shaped or reshaped to resonate with the signals now pulsing from 3i Atlas. If true, it meant the comet hadn't just interacted with Mars on arrival, it had been guiding it, shaping it, for years. Back on Earth, simulations ran day and night. What they revealed was terrifying. If the same pulses that shook Mars were directed at Earth, the effects could destabilize our magnetic field, trigger earthquakes, or worse. The only reason Earth wasn't vibrating with Mars's rhythm, some argued, was that our protective atmosphere and stronger magnetic field acted as a shield. But that shield had limits, and with 3i Atlas drawing closer to the Sun, analysts feared it might shift its attention. The story no longer felt like science fiction, it felt like strategy, a game unfolding on a planetary scale. Mars, with its thin skin and open wounds, had been an easier target. Earth, for now, remained spared. Yet the unanswered riddle gnawed at everyone. Was Mars truly the chosen world, or merely the first experiment? And if Mars had been activated, what was it being activated for? The pulses from 3i Atlas no longer behaved like random bursts of energy. For weeks, scientists tracked them, charted them, and eventually aligned them against universal constants. What emerged sent shivers across every lab. The rhythm of the pulses matched prime number sequences, coded in bursts of electromagnetic radiation. It wasn't noise, it was language, and Mars wasn't just listening. Seismographs across the planet began recording vibrations that weren't caused by quakes or wind. The ground itself seemed to hum, faintly at first, then in sync with the comet's pulses. Canyons and plains echoed like a tuning fork. Mars was resonating. But where was the energy going? Infrared scans revealed something extraordinary. Pockets of warmth deep under the Martian crust, rising in geometric patterns. It was as though the planet itself was being rewired. Vast hexagonal grids of faint heat signatures emerged in the northern plains, invisible to the naked eye but clear in orbital data. To many it looked like infrastructure. One chilling theory spread among the coalition's inner circles. Mars wasn't being awakened for life as we know it. It was being prepared as a transmitter, a planetary-scale beacon. The question was no longer whether 3I Atlas was communicating. The question was, with whom? And still the mystery deepened. Why did the signals bypass Earth entirely? Were we ignored or protected? The breakthrough came not from Earth, but from orbit. The Maven orbiter, circling Mars, captured something breathtaking. Faint auroras stretching far beyond the planet's poles. Unlike Earth's shimmering lights, these auroras pulsed in time with 3I Atlas. For the first time, the comet and Mars created a visible bridge across the void, written in light. And then came the data overlay. When mapped, the auroral pulses formed recognizable star patterns, not random constellations but specific ones, systems far beyond our solar neighborhood. Some had known exoplanets, some were suspected to harbor conditions suitable for life. The realization struck like lightning. Mars wasn't just resonating, it was sending coordinates. This was no passive awakening, it was an announcement, a flare to the cosmos. Here we are. The gateway is open. On Earth, reactions split violently. Optimists whispered of first contact, of humanity finally joining a galactic community. But skeptics warned, beacons don't just call friends, they call anyone listening. And not every listener is kind. What terrified many wasn't the idea that Mars was chosen, it was the idea that Earth wasn't. Were we overlooked because we were unworthy, or spared because we were being hidden? As the comet inched closer to the sun and Mars sang louder into the dark, the uneasy truth settled. This was no longer a mystery confined to red dust and telescopes. It was a message meant for the stars, and soon someone, or something, might answer. The beacons of Mars blazed brighter than ever. Night after night, its thin skies flared with auroras, emerald, violet, and crimson waves whispering across the poles. To the naked eye, it was mesmerizing. To radio telescopes, it was deafening. But then, the silence came. 3 days passed. No new pulses from 3I Atlas, no changes in the auroras, no new seismic hum from the Martian crust. For the first time since the comet crossed into the solar system, it went still. Scientists scrambled. Was the transmission complete? Had it reached its intended destination? Or was Mars simply waiting? And then came the anomaly. Deep space monitors, usually tuned to the faint background hiss of the universe, caught a pattern that didn't belong. It wasn't from Mars, it wasn't from 3I Atlas, it came from beyond. A reply. Faint, fractured, but undeniable. A signal that echoed the Martian pulses back at us, as though a voice from the dark had heard the call and was answering. But here's the twist. The signal wasn't directed at Mars. It was angled toward Earth. Why us? Why now? Had Earth been the target all along, shielded until the moment the reply arrived? Or was this a warning, a second message layered into the first? The comet had gone silent, but the universe had spoken. And in that silence, humanity faced a realization. Mars had lit the torch, but Earth might be the one expected to carry it. In a secure lab, far from public eyes, the first decoded fragments of the reply flickered across screens. Not words, not equations, but maps, star maps. Some pointed outward, to distant constellations where life might exist. But others pointed inward, toward our own solar system. highlighting not just Mars, not just the Sun, but Earth itself. The conclusion was inescapable. Whoever, or whatever, received Mars' signal already knew where we were, and now they wanted us to know they knew. The comet, still approaching the Sun, flared with renewed brilliance, its icy body shedding material like a torch being fed fresh fuel. Was this its final act, the closing of a relay it was designed to complete? Or was it waiting, like a herald pausing before announcing something even greater? No one could say. All we knew was this: Mars had spoken, the stars had answered, and Earth had been drawn into the conversation. As the final auroras faded from Mars's skies, astronomers whispered the question none wanted to voice aloud. What if Mars wasn't summoning 3i Atlas, but 3i Atlas was summoning what comes next? The documentary closes not with resolution, but with a weight, the sense that we are no longer spectators. We are participants. And as the comet nears the Sun, humanity holds its breath, waiting for the second chapter of a story written in cosmic fire.